All right, welcome to this explainer. If you're a chief investment officer or an institutional strategist, you're going to want to lean in for this one. The source material we're unpacking today covers what is literally the most critical mispriced macro variable in the market right now. We're talking about a massive structural pivot, a shift in economic agency from labor scarcity to infrastructure control. It's totally redefining where value accrues. And, it's honestly fascinating to see the research break down exactly why a staggering amount of institutional capital is currently sitting on the wrong side of history. So let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover the valuation framework trap, the scarcity shift, continuous execution mechanics, exposed versus advantage models, and finally, the new macro reality.
Okay, starting off with part one, the valuation framework trap, or why the market is pricing the completely wrong variable.
Look, we're all familiar with automation, right? We've been plugging it into our financial models for years. But the source material highlights a really dangerous complacency here. The consensus view basically treats machines replacing workers purely as an efficiency play, a simple productivity story. You know the logic: costs drop, margins expand, and the firm adopting the tech wins. Boom. But viewing this only as a margin expansion story, that fundamentally misses the deep structural reality of what's actually happening under the hood of the economic system.
Which brings us to section 2, the scarcity shift and the rapid migration of economic bottlenecks.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand why the market has this wrong, we have to look at the core thesis, the scarcity shift. Think about traditional valuation frameworks built around the human economy. Historically, capital's main job was to amplify human labor. Growth was capped by things like working hours, workforce participation, coordination overhead, basically human limits. But when machine execution displaces labor at scale, that primary constraint, the rate limiter, completely migrates. It's no longer bounded by people. It's bounded by infrastructure. We're talking compute capacity, energy supply, and raw system throughput.
So, what does this actually mean for us? It means that when machine execution pushes out human labor across an entire industry, the primary economic constraint rapidly and violently drops down to physical infrastructure. Right now, investors are running around asking which companies are adopting AI. But honestly, that's the wrong question. The absolutely vital question you should be asking is which companies control the physical infrastructure bottlenecks that continuous machine execution literally cannot avoid. Moving on to section 3, continuous execution mechanics, or the actual physics of the machine's system. This is the operational catalyst driving this whole macro shift, continuous execution. Now, firms don't just swap out labor for machines just for the fun of it. They do it because the total machine cost curve drops below the human cost curve while maintaining acceptable quality. And once that threshold is crossed, substitution isn't just a strategic choice anymore. It's a completely rational, unavoidable outcome. And here's the kicker. Unlike humans, machines don't work in shifts. They don't take coffee breaks. They don't pause for handoffs. They just run, relentlessly.
Let's move to the next concept and see how this builds. This relentless 24/7 running creates a totally new dynamic. The research calls it the constraint cascade. Because removing labor doesn't just speed things up, it actually creates entirely new breaking points within an economic system.
Let's walk through this operational change step by step. First, labor is removed. A process that maybe ran 8 hours a day now shifts into that continuous execution gear. This collapses sequential human coordination into parallel execution, which massively expands throughput. To put it in perspective, decision throughput goes from 1 unit per human interval to 1 unit per machine cycle. It's night and day. But this incredible speed immediately stresses the underlying infrastructure, and a new, hard physical constraint emerges, whether that's raw compute limits, energy grid limits, or fabrication capacity. And the source material really grounds this in industrial reality. Just look at FANUC's facilities in Japan. You've got robots building other robots for extended periods without any human intervention or scheduling. Or take the Siemens Amberg plant. Deep automation there has driven defect rates down to, wait for it, 0.0012%. That's practically zero. Variance in that facility is purely a function of system stability, not human error. Or consider Xiaomi's Chongping facility. They're pumping out a smartphone roughly every 3 seconds. In environments like these, output variance is governed entirely by physics and component availability. Human reliability is completely bypassed. All right, section 4, exposed versus advantage models, the capital allocation matrix. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how we translate it into a highly actionable taxonomy for portfolio managers. We're looking at a stark structural contrast in the market here. On one side, you have business models entirely reliant on human labor scaling, where costs literally equal headcount. On the flip side, you have constraint-controlled models. These scale through infrastructure, where value equals the control of the bottleneck itself.
Let's unpack the exposed side first. Firms like Teleperformance, Infosys, or State Street, they all share a deep structural vulnerability. They rely on massive pools of human labor doing structured, repeatable tasks. They grow by adding more people. But as machine systems start absorbing routing, digital service delivery, and financial reconciliation, their core rate limiter, human headcount, gets severely compressed. Under a continuous execution regime, their human layer goes from being a primary value driver to becoming a massive source of latency and cost.
But in sharp contrast, look at the advantaged bottlenecks. Think NVIDIA supplying persistent inference compute, TSMC controlling advanced fabrication, ASML holding the line on lithographic tooling limits, NextEra Energy providing that continuous power. These are the bottleneck controllers. They don't just casually benefit from automation. They capture compounding value. Why? Because their constraints tighten exponentially as machine demand scales up. They literally hold the physical keys that continuous execution depends on.
Finally, Section 5, the new macro reality, geopolitical and economic gravity.
Zooming out for a second, this systemic reorientation shifts macroeconomic reality at a foundational level. And this brilliantly illustrates what we can call economic gravity. Gravity is actively and decisively pulling value away from the top of the stack. Notice the migration here. Value moves straight away from layer 5, where labor is being removed, all the way down to layer 1, the hard physical constraints of infrastructure and materials. In a machine-bound economy, output is strictly limited by infrastructure capacity, not by human input. The institutional impact of this, it is profound. Economic expansion is going to increasingly bypass traditional demographic centers. Demographics, population growth, they are no longer decisive for production capacity. Instead, economic growth is going to hyper-concentrate in regions that command compute, energy, and fabrication. We're steering down a future where capital expenditure on infrastructure will drastically rise, while wage income will actually decline as a share of total economic output.
Bringing all these threads together into the machine economy stack, you see the entire paradigm shifting. We're moving from the left side, the human economy governed by workforce availability, over to the right side, the machine economy governed entirely by infrastructure control. So, the ultimate takeaway for your portfolio? Investment absolutely must pivot. You have to move violently away from labor-augmenting strategies and toward infrastructure-controlling strategies if you want to generate durable compounding returns going forward.
So the crucial point is captured perfectly by this quote from the research. Automation adoption is a decision. Bottleneck control is a structural position. One can be copied, the other compounds. Honestly, that is the exact realization that will separate the portfolios that thrive over the next decade from those that are merely pricing in the wrong variable.
Which leaves us with the only question that truly matters as we enter this new operational regime. As economic constraints migrate completely from human hands to physical infrastructure, where is your capital positioned? Are you holding the exposed or do you control the bottleneck?